Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Saalfeld. I was given the great pleasure of being part of the brand storytelling panel for these films that we're going to be able to screen. So I'm delighted to host the panel for the film If You Have, which was done in partnership between Breakwater Studios and UNICEF. So I'm going to introduce our co-panelists. So first up, we have Tyler Armstrong. He is the Managing Director of UNICEF Special Events and Experiences.
Hello.
Next up, hi.
Good to meet you.
Good to meet you as well. Next up, we have Tom Walker, the Executive Creative Director for UNICEF USA and supervising producer of the film If You Have.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Looking forward to it. And next up, we have Kul Chandra Gautam. He's the former UNICEF senior official and diplomat. And he is also the star and many memorable moments and quotes from the film as well. And next up, we have Ben Proudfoot. He's the Academy Award-winning director of the film and also the CEO of Breakwater Studios. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks
Delighted to have you here.
Thank you.
And I have to say, many tears were shed. It was such a touching and inspiring film, and there were so many moments in it that just really brought to life the mission of UNICEF and all of the incredible work and the worldwide impact. So congratulations and kudos all around to you. So Tyler, I'm going to start with you. Can you share a little bit about how the idea of If You Have came about?
Yes, and I just want to start by saying thank you so much for arranging this. And I just can't tell you how excited that UNICEF is to be involved with the Brand Storytelling Festival. This is like such a treat. So your question is a great one. We really, the film would not have happened if it had not been for the pandemic for really a number of reasons. Because in 2020, when the world shut down, UNICEF USA, like many organizations, canceled all of our fundraising events around March of 2020. And so we had a huge void to fill. We needed to fill a void of the absence of connecting all of our supporters. And we also needed to continue to fundraising. Our relief efforts were not slowing down because the pandemic hit. So, and then at the same time, we also wanted to make sure that people knew UNICEF's very important role in vaccinating the world through COVAX. So my special events team, along with Tom and some others on the marketing and communication side, had to pivot very quickly and examine our skill sets and resources, and then decide how we were going to bring people together to raise awareness and funding for the world's children. So first, we produced an educational streaming event that went on to air on MSNBC, and then we produced a live stream event that was a fundraiser. And then we started talking about the idea of doing a documentary, a film that could tell the story of UNICEF like it has never been told before, from an outsider's point of view. And that film would be used to celebrate our 75th anniversary, which was last year. So after we floated the idea around with one of our board members, her name is Wendy Serino, who's fabulous. She was very interested in this project and telling the UNICEF story in a different way. So she offered it to connect us to some of her contacts at Sundance, who then introduced us to a very talented director. And now it's been
who wasn't available, so they had to call me.
So humble.
So our first meeting with Ben was just kismet. It really was. He got us in so many senses of getting us. He knew exactly what we wanted to do. And you could tell from the very beginning that it was going to be a very extraordinary partnership. And so that was the beginning of the project.
That's amazing. Yeah, I know fundraising was especially challenging at the time. So thank you for keeping up with the work, and congratulations on a big anniversary. What a way to celebrate it.
Truly, truly.
Wonderful. So we're going to pivot over to Tom next. So I understand the anniversary, 75 years. So what else contributed to taking this moment and immortalizing it into a short documentary?
Well, we knew that because of the 75th anniversary, we wanted to tell the story of UNICEF. And UNICEF has an incredible history from 1946, coming out of World War II, and then eventually becoming the UN agency directing the aid to the entire globe's worth of children, and all the humanitarian work that comes along with it. And we also knew that we didn't want to just tell a look back story. We wanted to tell a right now story. And because of the pandemic, and coincidentally at the same time, UNICEF had been named the lead delivery agency for COVAX. COVAX was the coalition, the initiative that brought together all these organizations to deliver vaccines equitably across the world to something like 180 countries. And UNICEF was chosen as the delivery aspect because we had, for the past 75 years, been putting into place the infrastructure, the cold chain to get vaccines anywhere in the world and still keep them at that cold temperature that they need to not spoil, and the expertise to be able to understand how to get things there. And so it really became a great narrative for the film to be able to talk about both the history of everything that led up to this moment, and then why UNICEF was the perfect organization for this moment at that time to deliver 1.5 billion vaccines around the world.
Amazing. Yeah, such an incredible untold story. And I learned so much from it, which just speaks to how interesting it was, but how educational at the same time. So on that note, heading over to Kul over there, star of the film, many witty, charming moments in the film. So your origin story and relationship to UNICEF almost spanned your entire life. Can you tell us about those days in Nepal and what led to your connection, and then connection to UNICEF overall?
I'm about 75 years old, about the same age as UNICEF.
Yeah.
And in my childhood, I grew up way up in the mountains of Nepal, because nobody had heard of UNICEF at that time. And as it was said, UNICEF was most active in the post-World War II Europe and China and Japan, not yet in countries like Nepal, but it came quickly. And my first recollection of UNICEF was when I was about the age of 11, 12 in Kathmandu. I saw this vehicle you see in the film with the sign UNICEF. And that was all I knew. But what I knew also was, you see in that film, those bundles of pipes being taken on the backs of people up in the mountains. And what a tremendous difference that did. Those were for water supply.
Yeah.
You know, you say UNICEF changes people's lives in a dramatic way. And nothing is more dramatic than water supply. Because up in the mountains of Nepal, women had to walk for hours and hours to fetch water. And once UNICEF supplied, and in partnership with the government, pipe water or well water near their homes, suddenly women were liberated. Women were emancipated. Not only diseases were reduced, people had drinking water, but girls could now think about going to school. They did not go to school in those days. And diseases were eradicated. So I saw the fantastic impact that I had in my country. I realized that later on, because at that time I did not know it was UNICEF. Subsequently, I realized, oh my God, it was an organization called UNICEF in partnership with other organizations. Another story I would say is in my childhood, I used to see in every town, wherever there was a fair or a gathering of people, many people had big necks, goiter. It's a disease that hardly any people know here. But it is not only an ugly goiter, it is because of iodine deficiency. And what iodine deficiency does is mental retardation. It is the world's largest cause of mental retardation. And through iodizing salt, providing salt, iodized salt to people, we reduced this goiter so much that today there are hardly anybody in Nepal that has goiter. So mental retardation was addressed. And of course, immunization. The first vaccine I ever got was smallpox, which does not exist in the world today. It was the first disease eradicated. And that was provided by UNICEF in partnership with WHO. So that was the first vaccine I recall. And that changed so much the lives, not only of myself, but my villagers, everybody in the community. Nepal today had drastically reduced child mortality, infant mortality, maternal mortality because of those investment in water and sanitation, education, water supply, and goiter control. So extraordinary impact.
It's amazing. Yeah, the sheer breadth and just the ripple effect of, on women and freeing up time, and then children, and all of the work and with immunizations to help children, just amazing. So thank you for sharing your background, and so brilliant in the film as well. So Ben, headed over to you next.
I'm ready.
Again, goosebumps. I get goosebumps talking to Kul. I get goosebumps talking to you. So share with us a little bit. So, I know you work a lot with brands. UNICEF is one of those iconic brands. Can you talk a little bit about how you might have approached this, knowing that it was a brand, knowing that it was the 70th anniversary during a pandemic and the bills on top of that? Can you share a little bit about that process?
Yeah. It was a tall order.
Yeah.
I remember the first calls we had, and to put it into context, this was the time when in the United States, there was the newspaper was filled like A1 through 6 with stories about vaccines coming to America, and vaccine hesitancy, and vaccines spoiling, and when were we going to get it, and all this discussion about what was going on with vaccines in the United States. And I remember on the call, I hadn't even given a thought to the rest of the world. I hadn't even given a thought of how are they going to get vaccinated. And I remember on this call, they said, well, UNICEF is part of this coalition that's responsible for delivering, I can't remember exactly, 1 or 2 billion vaccines around the world through COVAX. And these are the people that are the most vulnerable. And I just remember feeling, first off, feeling like, man, I have really been living in a very small mental world of just what's immediately around me. Yeah. And that I haven't even thought of all of these other human beings all over the planet who are not in the newspaper, And then the second thought is, that's a huge story, and it's a historic moment, right? You could feel the energy on the call of like, it's our job, and we haven't done it yet, to deliver billions of vaccines to try to save, ultimately millions of lives. And it's up to us, and it's the largest vaccine mobilization of all time. And we want you to make a film that captures all of it. And then they said, oh, by the way, it's also our 75th birthday, and we want to kind of tell the whole history of the thing. And, it needs to raise a bunch of money on the big anniversary. But it can't be longer than, 30, 40 minutes.
So you were like, no problem.
Yeah, I said, great. We work well under pressure with tall orders, So it sounded like an incredibly worthwhile undertaking and noble mission. And it also is something that was near and dear to my heart, because I remember as a kid going around with the orange trick-or-treat UNICEF boxes, collecting dimes and quarters and loonies and toonies from my neighborhood. And I knew, the name UNICEF, but I don't think most people know the story of UNICEF. And they certainly, as I learned slowly over the course of the first few weeks on the project, reading books and listening to stories, it's an absolutely incredible history. I mean, truly, like, remarkable, like, really, oh my goodness, like, this is an amazing story with so many amazing people that has accomplished so many things that we take for granted. So it was just a question of, how can we tell the story of what UNICEF is, its dedication to children, and who are the people who represent the brand? You asked about the brand, right? The brand can't speak, but people can speak. Yeah. So who are the people who embody UNICEF? And pretty quickly, I was doing sort of deep background calls with a number of people that UNICEF had connected me to. That Tyler and Tom had connected me to. And one of those people was Kul. And this was not an interview to be on camera. This was like, oh, Kul knows everything. He knows everybody. He can give you information. And as soon as he started talking, I said, we got to get this guy on camera. As you can tell, right? He's just, so full of passion and a great oral storyteller, one of the best oral storytellers I've had the pleasure of capturing. And I said, don't tell me anymore. We got to get you on camera. And I was prepared to take everything, all the crew, everything, and go to Nepal. And I was calling from my office in Los Angeles. And I said, Kul, where are you? And he said, I'm in Silver Lake. I'm in Los Angeles. It was about 10 minutes away from my office. I said, oh my goodness gracious, this is heaven sent. And that was our first interview, was with Kul, and kind of told the whole story of the whole shebang, and that laid the spine of the film, which we then spent the next many months traveling, doing our, putting in our traveling, putting in our miles to Ghana and all over Europe, etc. Central America to tell this big story.
Yeah, there were so many different moments in the film, but one, as a mom, Florence's story really resonated with me. Could you share a little bit more of, like, behind the scenes of Florence's story?
Yeah, so, this is always an interesting thing, because you're sitting in the comfort of your studio and okay, we knew that we needed someone who needed the vaccine, right? We wanted to tell their story, because the more involved in their story, the more important you will understand that dose and how important it is to get it there, which was what we were tracking. Yeah. So, okay, we need to find someone, right? And actually, we need to find someone who has had their first dose, but not their second dose. And we also need to arrive there at the moment when they're actually going to get it, because we can't fake it. And we certainly can't delay it until we get there.
Yeah.
And then it's UNICEF. So we need someone who, a lot of children rely on this person. It's, there's so many different, so we started writing down, who's our dream person. We ended up going to Ghana, which was an amazing place with incredible UNICEF staff there. And we just started meeting with people. I just started meeting with people. And the second person I met was Florence. And she had this compound, this sort of enclosed compound, which is perfect. All these kids running around, she's feeding them all. And she was so generous and so kind and so representative of just sort of that selfless caretaking parent that the globe is encircled with.
Yeah.
And she said, yeah, I'm waiting for that. I'm waiting for my jab. And we knew enough we had enough information from what was being publicly released from COVAX, et cetera, that a large shipment was going to come to Ghana. Actually, it was the day after we arrived that that plane landed. The plane that's in the film, that was the first thing we shot in Ghana. And it took some time for it to work its way through the system. And that's when we were, filming Florence's story. But I thought it was a beautiful story that she told, and she just sort of became the world's mother for our film.
Yes. Well, wonderful serendipity with Kul's location to be able to, but Florence's story again, also incredible. So Tyler, coming back to you, I think Ben spoke to it a little bit about some of the objectives for the film with helping with fundraising and then, capturing like the 75 years of UNICEF's, history. Can you share more about, like, as you all were thinking about this, how did you think about objectives and what you were hoping to do with it?
Yes, absolutely. Before I get there though, I mean, tall order was like, an understatement of the century. Like, we really made it as challenging as possible. And I think every week that went by, and there weren't many weeks, we would say, and by the way, like, we need to send you to Ghana in 2 weeks. By the way, you need like these requirements to enter Ghana. And every obstacle that we presented, Ben and everybody at Breakwater was just so like accommodating. It was like, okay, we're pivoting, we're doing this now. And so it was just, it was really thrilling to work with them. And it was a documentary, but in many ways it was kind of an action adventure story. We I think met with Ben probably in April, and he was in Ghana by June. So it was such a quick turnaround, the whole process. But back to your question on objectives, it was so important to UNICEF for so many reasons, but the storytelling piece was really what we wanted to make sure that we were investing in a storyteller like Ben and his team. We knew that he had a talent for research as well as meeting people and knowing that people like Kul could be, really capturing and embodying UNICEF's great 75 years. So it was storytelling that was the main objective, and it's as everybody on this call knows, and it's a very complex organization, and it's very difficult. And Tom knows this better than anyone, to write an elevator pitch for UNICEF, because we do so much. So we wanted people who were either like just a little familiar with UNICEF or who didn't know UNICEF at all, to watch the film and say, oh, I get it now. Like that was the main objective. So my favorite story about that is that one of our board members, the evening that the film premiered last November, a lot of people came to the premieres in person, and some were watching virtually, because this was still, like we had Omicron, like I think 2 weeks after the film premiered. So people were in various different stages, even when the film premiered, on comfort of being together in person. She watched the film with her son, and she said that she had always struggled with her teenage son. She had always struggled with talking to her son about UNICEF, something that she cared so much about. And she felt like the film was a great way to watch it together and to really introduce him to UNICEF. And she said that he's really somebody that as a guy of few words, but the film concluded and he looked at her and he said, "Mom, UNICEF is lit." And she said that it just meant everything to her to know that he appreciated something as much as she did, and that it really spoke to him. And since, it's been shown at film festivals throughout the year. It's been recognized throughout this past year. We launched it on YouTube. It's gotten, over 50,000 hits. All of that is just so exciting, and I mean that was all part of the objective, the awareness as well as the fundraising.
Yeah,
So
for sure. Yeah, that's a high compliment from, how old is the son?
I think he was 13. Yeah.
Okay, high endorsement from a teenager to say something's lit. So that's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I would love to pose this to Kul next. Just what really struck me was interdependence. I think throughout the pandemic, just with having to stay isolated in your homes, I think a lot of folks felt isolated and didn't necessarily feel as connected to others. And you talked about that, how the ripple effect of a situation or a pandemic starting over in a different part of the world, that people should care about that. Can you speak to that theme of interdependence, and what other themes did you feel strongly came through in the film?
Three things I would say, almost like a takeaway from this film. I hope that the people who watch this film will gather. One is investing in children is the best investment. There is no better investment in the world. Why? Because first, you protect children to survive by vaccinating, providing health services, providing water, sanitation, etc. But survival is not enough. If you survive, you need to thrive. You don't want a miserable life just to be living. And what UNICEF does, providing education, empowering, protecting from violence, exploitation, that is also very important. Second takeaway I hope that people will have from this film is that we live, as you say, in a very interdependent world. No matter how powerful a country, how rich a person, how rich a corporation, you cannot save and prosper the world by yourself. I'll give you an example. In the before COVID, today COVID has killed 3 million people in the world. But one of the biggest killers in the world in history was smallpox. That killed almost 300 million people. It lasted for 3,000 years. And we were in a campaign together with the World Health Organization. When it was eradicated through an amazing interdependent partnership. In those days, in the 60s and 70s, at the height of the Cold War, Russia, Soviet Union, and the US were enemies. They could not get along. But to eradicate polio, we forced a partnership between the superpowers for smallpox eradication. As a result of which, smallpox that used to kill 4 or 5 million people every year has been eradicated. Could not have been done by the US alone, because there were many countries who did not trust the US. Could not have been done by the Soviet Union alone, because there were many countries did not trust. We brought them together, and that is the story of COVID also. When countries come together, we can solve problems. Alone, you cannot. Third thing I would say is, many people may feel, oh, the world is hopeless. What can you do? There is so much war, so much poverty, injustice, inequality, nothing can be done. I hope this film gives you the message that there is hope.
Yeah.
When countries, people, citizens participate, world can be changed tremendously. And one reason why I have in the background this film of my film, you see these beautiful Himalayan mountains of Nepal.
Yeah.
70 years from now, the snow will no longer be there in those mountains. Why? Because of climate change. And who can address climate change? Nepal cannot address it alone. US cannot address it alone. If we all get together, US, China, India, Nepal, all of us together, we can prevent those mountains from melting. And the impact it will have on children is that If those mountains melted, there would be glaciers melting, there would be floods, there would be landslides, billion people around those mountains in Asia, the heaviest populated countries of India, China, Nepal, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Pakistan will be impacted. But if we work together, we will tackle the climate issue and we will protect children. We will save the world. We'll make the world a livable place. And it can be done. It has been done. We have eradicated smallpox. We are on the verge of eradicating polio. We are on the verge of eradicating a guinea worm disease. Fantastic things can be done when we work together, but it cannot be done alone. And focus on children, you can change the world. And there is hope.
Well, mission very well accomplished, because those were my takeaways as well. But I can definitely see why Ben was like, we've got to get Kul on tape. Oh, wonderful. So on that note, Ben, back over to you. Would love to understand, you've talked a little bit about engaging with the stars in the film and connecting to the story. Would love to understand more about your creative process, in particular when a brand's involved, and how you go about that.
Yeah. I feel all fired up, Kul. You're literally, I think, the best public speaker I've ever met. I wish you could be president of the world. So my creative process, I think it's not dissimilar to what Kul said. It's all about trust. So, it can't be simply a filmmaker who goes and does exactly what they want without regard for what the brand needs or what the mission is, and vice versa. It can't be the brand telling the filmmaker exactly what to do as they see it. It's a trusting relationship. I think oftentimes, because of the power dynamic between a big brand who's got the budget, who's got the money, and small production companies or individual filmmakers, generally the brand has a lot more control and influence and micro understanding of everything that's going on. So one of the first things that we do at Breakwater is we say, we're asking for a lot of leeway here. We're asking you for your trust. And that's a huge leap of faith for a giant organization to take, knowing that in 6 months, the lights are going to go down in 10 cities across the country. All the top donors, all the top people, all the principals of UNICEF will watch this film, and they're trusting this Canadian 30-year-old guy to deliver. But I knew, we need it. I needed their trust to let us try to go do this. And that was a huge leap of faith that UNICEF took, and that created space for us to give a gift. Because I think that's the big thing, is creativity, one's art is a gift. And, you have to choose to give the gift. And you need space to be able to say, okay, UNICEF is depending on us. This is a huge moment in history. UNICEF is depending on us to cover it. UNICEF is depending on us to dig up all the appropriate archival and make a definitive film. And if UNICEF is depending on us, the children of the world are depending on us. And that creates a beautiful and very high stakes sandbox for me and a whole village of creative people, composers, editors, cinematographers, producers, sound designers, et cetera, to all come together and say, okay, how can we best serve this mission to tell the story that's there? And that's the beautiful thing about what UNICEF asked us to do, is they said, we know it's an amazing story, we just don't know how to fit it into 35 minutes. So that was our job. We didn't have to create an amazing story. There's too many amazing stories. You can literally lift 3 minutes out of the film and turn it into a feature film. There's that much information there and things that were happening. And I might just do that. But I think the big piece that I think about when I think about UNICEF and Breakwater and sort of like how those entities work together was the extraordinary trust that they had for us, and very different organizations, right? We're very small, in comparison, relatively new, ask for forgiveness type of organization. And, UNICEF is tasked with gigantic missions all around the world. This is one of the best logistics entities that humankind has ever created. And so there's a lot of cooperation and trust that occurred that allowed us to be creative and collaboration. I remember workshopping some of our titles with Tom and going back and forth about, how do we want to word this and phrase this, and, talking about how the film should be shaped, or, which pieces from history, were the most representative. And obviously we have our collaboration with Kul, which was, just one of the most amazing conversations I've had in my life, which we happened to capture on film. And so my job is basically to collect as much of that as humanly possible. It's kind of like, I'm in my kitchen, it's kind of like a counter full of fresh ingredients that you pulled out of the ground. And then you look at this thing and say, okay, we got to make dinner. And you say, well, the carrots are really good, and this other thing is good, and we've got this, but we've only got half an hour, and you kind of fashion up something that you think will taste good. And I don't know how that process works, but it usually does. And it involves a lot of extremely talented people, which this film is kind of the end credits on this film is a stacked deck of the best collaborators that we have. So that's kind of our process. And there was a lot of back and forth all along the way. It was pretty high touch.
Yeah, it sounds like a special relationships across the board, just at UNICEF and at Breakwater and the rest of the team together. So that's awesome. Very cool. And if there is a director's extended cut coming, I know there are a lot of people that would want to watch it. And 80th is just as big as 75th. So I feel like you have another moment on the horizon. So on that note then, back to you, Tyler. Can you talk then? I know we've shared a little bit about objectives. Can you talk about impact that you've seen from the film?
Yes. So we're still in it. I think that, it's been over a year and we're still seeing the impact from many different perspectives. The people who have seen the film and reached out to us and shared their thoughts and stories and asked questions about it. Like, I think that that's been really extraordinary. But it's also been a very successful new form of way of doing events and reaching people and connecting people. So beyond just the impact that it's had on the dollars that it's been able to raise, which was over $9 million through both the executive producers that are mostly board members and people who really felt strongly about the project, that came together and decided that they were going to underwrite all of the production costs that went into to producing the film. So outside of that, all of the people who supported last year's premiere events, we did 10 premieres across the country, in person and virtual. And so collectively, the executive producers and all of those events raised over 9 million, and that's unrestricted dollars that UNICEF can use wherever it's needed the most. And that is just the impact is it's beyond words. The lives that can change, and not the lives just that it can change within the year when the funds are received, but these are like lifelong changes that if kids can be kept in school, it can change like your entire trajectory of life. It gives me chills to think about. So it continues to instill that UNICEF is dedicated and committed to ensuring that every child is healthy, educated, protected, and respected. And I think Ben Kul and everybody who was featured in the film, all of the stories that were told in the film. They did such a beautiful job at capturing that like UNICEF essence that we do. UNICEF goes and does whatever it takes to reach these kids. And as far as the 80th anniversary, Ben, I'll be sure and call you 2 weeks out from when we need the film, and and we'll be like, we need passports, we need visas. But yeah, I think it's exciting that this group of executive producers, the group of the team at Breakwater, they're all asking us what's next, and that's an exciting place to be too, and that speaks to impact.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, congratulations.
I did
Ben?
want to say, yeah, I just wanted to say, for folks watching this who are maybe thinking about their own film or making their own film, the model that UNICEF created for this is very unique. I had never really quite seen it before, and it was very successful. But basically, you had one person, Wendy, who, she had the vision, right? Mm-hmm. She said, we're going to make this film, we're going to get it done. Mm-hmm. And she was the champion. But she's not like an employee of UNICEF. She's a board member, I believe, in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And what they did was they said, okay, to raise the money for the movie, they went around to people who had supported or were interested in supporting UNICEF and basically said, we have an executive producer slot, for 10% of the budget or so. Do you want to be an executive producer on the film? And the thing filled up, and and Wendy went around and she said, I'm in, are you in? And it was kind of like almost a Silicon Valley method of fundraising where, all these people came in and took and filled up the slots. And it was brilliant. And I've never really seen that happen before. I mean, I don't know, how many executive producers did we end up with on this?
We had 12, and
12.
And it was like Ben said, it was so brilliant to watch it all take place so quickly. Wendy was so committed and determined, and she knew that she had a group of people in Chicago. What was so cool about it is that it gave us a chance to go across the country, bring board members together to work on a project in a way that they've never really done before, because they've been working on their own individual projects, their event or campaign projects within their own regions. So this was a cross-country collaboration, yeah. And it was truly we're wanting to recreate it again and again, and I think we will.
Yeah, it was amazing, and I think it's a model that could be duplicated at any foundation or organization that has that kind of network of supporters.
I love that. And it brings through again the theme of interdependence, but I love interdependence, and innovation seems to be in UNICEF's DNA. So that's great.
Yes.
I love that. So Tom, we're going to close out with you. So given our audience is made up of a lot of brand builders like myself, would love to understand, I know Ben mentioned part of it in terms of how Wendy contemplated this idea. Can you give advice to other brand builders who are thinking about storytelling and content as a way to bring to life their brand ambitions?
Sure. Clearly, the answer is hire Ben Proudfoot in Breakwater and then have Kul Gautam be your spokesperson.
That's done.
It's an easy formula. No, I mean, from a creative standpoint, you get a creative brief, and even for a fantastic organization like UNICEF, people have laid out, what we want to say and the points we want to get across, key messages and proof points and all that sort of thing. And you can easily slip into what you consider to be your own strong points. And UNICEF has amazing strong points. UNICEF has things unlike I've ever seen before. The statistics that UNICEF participates in are things like it played a role in 39 million babies being born last year. UNICEF is responsible in any given year for vaccinating about 48% somewhere between 45 and 50% of the world's children under the age of 5. The numbers are just staggering and amazing. But you also have to take it from the audience's point of view and what the audience wants to hear. And so many times the things that move the audience are the stories and the things that they're emotionally available to hear about and to get excited about are exactly what Ben provided from this film. And so you know, we try to in the marketing department at UNICEF USA, where I am, maintain that audience centricity in our messaging, to let that dictate, let that be the final, if there's something that needs to have a final decision to be made about it, let what the audience wants to hear and what's going to be good for them to hear make that final decision and be the deal breaker. And it's a great way to do it. And luckily we have great stories and we have great storytellers like all the people here.
Agreed. Well, on that note, I just wanted to thank all of you again. I truly enjoyed the film, and I know we as a community loved the film as well. And congratulations and thank you to all the work that you do at UNICEF, and your impact is huge and worldwide. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so much.
you
So much, Anna.
Thank you for screening the film. Thank you, Anna.